In today's video, I wanted to go through and discuss the Fighters Guild questline featured in the Elder Scrolls 3 Morrowind. The Fighters Guild is one of the many factions present and joinable within the province, and the several guild halls throughout Morrowind are located in Uldrune, Balmora, Vivec, and the Wolverine Hall. Most of the tasks that the Fighters Guild takes on involves protection, extermination, bounty hunting, and retrieval of goods. Sometimes though, and as we'll all come to see through this questline, the stories and plot lines run deeper than what lies beyond the surface. The facts and information provided in this video are brought to you by the game itself and the unofficial Elder Scrolls pages. The story of the Fighters Guild will be covered from my subjective point of view, as this is the first time I'm playing through it. I'm going to ask questions, comment my thoughts, share my opinion on some of the mechanics, features, and story elements, but will still retain objective plot points. Our story begins in any of the aforementioned towns of Morrowind. If you've played through the first bit of the main questline for the game and have spoken to Caius, he'll send you to the Fighters Guild to learn some information. For many, including myself, this could have very well been your first exposure to the guild. Before embarking on the rest of the main quest, Caius will even tell you to go out into the world and make a name for yourself, suggesting a career in the Fighters Guild. Regardless of how it's discovered, I found myself wandering into the Balmora faction hall, looking to grow my talents as a melee fighter and in search of a higher purpose. The first NPC I spoke with was Facile Charasil, and I asked her about the guild. She told me that Eydis Fireeye is the steward for this location, and that I should speak with her if I'd like to enlist. I found Fireeye at the top of the stairs, just behind Facile. Speaking with her, she asked what I had wanted, and then wondered if I was here to join the guild. Inquiring about it, she said that I looked like I could take care of myself. Fireeye mentioned that I should read up on the charter before making any decisions though. Ignoring it, I wanted to jump straight in, and I told her to sign me up. She grants me the rank of associate and tells me that as long as I follow orders, everything will be just fine. Once I feel as though I'm ready for it, I can ask her for an advancement as well. Getting right into the tasks she has laid out for me, Fireeye says that there is a very simple contract. There's an infestation of rats that she wants me to handle. Apparently, Geraint Thalos has rats occupying her home here in Balmora. I'm to find out where they're coming from, and then I'm to exterminate them. Once that's done, she'll give me my compensation, and then I'm to return back here. Eydis told me that Thalos lives on the east side along the river, so I went from door to door looking around. I have to say, this quest feels really near and dear to me. In Oblivion, which is where most of my Elder Scrolls time has been dedicated to, one of the first quests for the Fighters Guild is called a rat problem, and the person you need to help out is named Arvena Thalos. It's really interesting to see the inspiration that Oblivion pulled from its predecessors. Finding Geraint's home and entering inside, I spotted the Myrrh right away and began speaking with her. She asked if I was sent here to take care of the rats, and I told her yes. Thalos mentioned that she's worried the vermin will eat all of her pillows. Apparently, there's one trapped in her bedroom, and the other two are in her storage area. She handed me the key to upstairs, and followed up with saying she believes there are only 3 of them to take care of. Exiting the conversation, I went straight for the door behind her and cracked it open. The first rat was right in the entranceway, and a swift jab with my Daedric spear did the trick. Curiously, looking inside of her room, she most certainly had a lot of pillows to worry about. Leaving her home and ascending up the stairs on the side of the building, I used the key and entered inside of the storage area. Immediately, I was attacked by 2 rats, but again, one prod with my spear was all that was needed. You can definitely tell with the first couple of quests that they're designed for very beginner level players, which completely makes sense. Returning to Thalos, I told her of the cave rats, and she said she would take my word on them being dead. She handed me 100 septims, and that was it for the quest. It's interesting because Fireeye had originally asked me to find out where they were coming from, but that never really came into play for this task. In any case, returning back to the Nord, she was impressed with my work and asked if I was ready for more. Accepting the offer, Eydis said that a local egg mine was having problems with egg poachers. Inquiring about it, she informed me that the Quama eggs are a very lucrative export for Morrowind. Apparently, Drambero of House Halalu owns Egg Shulk Mine and wants to make an example out of the thieves. She name drops them as Savilo Othin and Dainila Valis. Now, a fun fact about this quest, which leads to a very important life lesson for Morrowind, I had already gone exploring in the mines and had actually killed the 2 poachers. In fact, this was long ago when I was trying to increase my spear skill. I picked a random dungeon to enter inside of, wandered around for a bit, killing Kwama foragers, warriors, workers, and even a queen. At the time, I was around level 5 or so, and it really wasn't too difficult or lengthy of a quest. The aforementioned troublemakers, Savilo and Danila, fought with pickaxes and weren't really much of a challenge. As for the life lesson in this game, the most obscure or most mundane of interactions can actually be tied into a lot of different quests. In the other Elder Scrolls installments, a lot of the quest-related enemy NPCs are spawned in as soon as a certain stage of the quest has been triggered. In Morrowind, be careful of who or what you kill, as you never know what's actually tied to a side quest. Regardless, I was able to immediately follow up my conversation with FireEye and tell her that the poachers were dead. She was again proud of the work I had accomplished and paid me out 100 septims. She also rewarded me with 4 quality restore fatigue potions that the guild had acquired on a recent raid. From what I learned about my time in the Morag Tong, the guild advancement mechanic is very different in this game versus future Elder Scrolls installments. Your character has to meet specific level requirements for specific skills and attributes pertaining to the faction. So, for the Fighters Guild, the favorite skills are Axe, Longblade, Blunt, Heavy Armor, Armorer, and Block, and the favorite attributes are Strength and Endurance. None of those are skills I've really progressed with for this character, however, I have been wanting to use Longblade, so this was the perfect excuse to level up that skill. Facile Charasil of the guild actually offers training in it, so I went to her and started paying for skill increases. In order to advance to the apprentice rank, I need one of the favorite skills at level 10. For now, the training isn't so expensive to receive, however, I knew for a fact that as time went on, I'd have to dish out some big coin. Returning back to FireEye, she finally promoted me to apprentice, and I asked her for more work. She told me that there's a contract put out on some Telvanni agents, and it was sent in by the Caldera Mining Company. Apparently, there are 4 agents responsible for thefts and disappearances up at the mines. She calls the perpetrators out as Alino Aurelin, Sithasa Nerothrin, Forthina Herothrin, and Alvaleg. The 4 are apparently hiding out in a cave just north of the mines. However, one of them is likely to be posted as a lookout just outside of it. Now, the part that I find the most interesting in all of this is that when asked about each individual, she'll call them out as members of the Thieves Guild. However, she insists that the guild has nothing to do with the thefts and disappearances, which is quite odd. If you question it being a Thieves Guild job, FireEye will actually question your loyalties, saying that killing one of their own is grounds for expulsion, and that it won't get reported as a murder if no one says anything about it. This is a pretty good time to mention, as it's been pointed out to me, and it's currently being set up. The Thieves Guild and the Fighters Guild are at odds with one another. Getting to a certain point in either of the quest lines will cut you off from completing the other one. There is apparently a workaround for that, although for the sake of this video, I just want to focus on the Fighters Guild side of things. Arriving in Caldera, I followed the townsfolk's directions to the mines and quickly approached the site. Looking around, I noticed a wood elf perched in some shrubs just outside of a cave. Getting in closer, it turned out to be Alvaleg, one of the 4 agents I was sent to hunt down. Speaking with him, his opening line was being awestruck at my Nerevarine status. Trying to get some interesting dialogue out of him, I asked about the Thieves Guild, but he only responded by wondering if I wanted to join. Soon, I found the Telvanni agent's prompt, and at first, he mentioned he hadn't seen any of them around here. Then, he followed up with turning hostile towards me, and the fight began. 2 successful jabs with my spear, and the Bosmer was defeated. Again, these are entry-level quests, so there really isn't much difficulty here. Beyond Alvaleg was the entrance into Ashinamu. Going inside and venturing a little bit in, the 3 remaining agents were grouped up along the pathway. Getting within eyeshot, they aggroed onto me and came charging in. I imagine for lower level players, becoming overwhelmed by the attackers would be a possible issue. So a pretty good strategy would be to hold them at a narrow choke point, so that way there's only one-on-one contact. Very soon, all 3 of them were defeated, and I decided to grab some loot out of the cave. On an elevated platform just beyond the agents, there was a trapped, locked, rusted chest that contained the Murdrum Ring, an enchanted piece that fortifies sneak for 10 points for 30 seconds and makes the user invisible also for 30 seconds. Once all was said and done, I leapt back to Caldera, used the Mages Guild teleportation services, and returned to the Fighters Guild. For convenience, I cast a mark in front of Eydis and then spoke again with the Nord. She was happy to hear about my completion of the task, commenting that the mining company probably feels a whole lot safer now. She pays me out 400 gold, and then I went and got more Longblade training with Facile. Once I reached level 20, FireEye promoted me to the rank of Journeyman. Asking again for another job, she told me that I needed to fetch a codebook for one of the guild's clients. Apparently, the codebook is currently in possession of someone named Satilde at the South Wall Corner Club here in Balmora. When asked about Satilde, surprise surprise, she's a member of the Thieves Guild. Eydis gets defensive and says that even though it's her fault the book is gone, I should respect her authority and do as I'm told. Leaving the guild hall and traversing across town, I arrived at the corner club and entered inside. Immediately, I was face to face with my target. Speaking with the Nord, I asked her about the book, and she played coy, pretending not to know what I was on about. Realizing what needed to be done, I cast Charm on her and tried again. This time, she called me her friend and handed it right over. She said she didn't want any trouble with me and asked that I don't tell anyone about our little transaction. I wanted to have a quick peek at the codebook for curiosity's sake, but similar to the coded package from Caius, the words were all scrambled and they didn't make any sense. Returning to Eydis, she asked if I had the book, and I was given the option to hand it over to her or not. This sort of acts as a point of no return for the Fighters Guild, and apparently makes completing the Thieves Guild questline very difficult. Choosing to give the codebook to FireEye, she paid me out 50 septims and commented that the guild needs more workers like me. Before continuing onwards with contracts, I went back to Facile and inflated my Longblade skill to level 30. I'm torn on how I feel about Morrowind's rank advancement mechanic. I feel as though needing to have your skills meet a certain standard does make a lot of sense, but at the same time, I don't really like how it has to fall under a favored skill or favored attribute. My character is proficient in light armor and spear, which to me should fit right in with the fighter standards. I understand that it's meant to streamline specific classes into specific factions, but it also feels a little too limiting. Returning to FireEye, she promoted me to the rank of swordsman, and I asked her for more orders. She told me that someone by the name of Helvien Desolé owes one of the guild's clients 200 gold in debt money. Desolé runs a corner club in Saran, and Manos Althrelith is the client. I'm to bring the money back to FireEye, and I get to keep half of it. There isn't a dialogue prompt for Manos, but he is one of Orvis Dren's men from the Kimona Tong. Traveling to Saran and entering inside of the House of Earthly Delights, I cased the NPCs for Desolé. Helvien was actually one of the bartenders, and speaking with her, she welcomed me to her home. Inquiring about the debt money, she tells me that the Kimona Tong keeps badgering her to pay up for their protection, but it feels like more of a shakedown as they're really the ones causing trouble around here. In the end, she refuses to pay it. There are a variety of ways to handle going forward. Among them is to kill her and to take the money. However, casting a simple charm spell raises her disposition high enough, and then the debt money prompt can be tried again. This time, she said I had convinced her, and she handed me over the 200 gold, following this by asking me to tell the Kimona Tong to leave her alone once and for all. With the money in hand, I cast Recall and approached Eydis. She asked if I had recovered the drakes, and I was prompted to hand them over to her. Doing so, she gave me my half, and I got straight into my next assignment. Apparently, there's a contract out for someone named Dura Grabol. She's an orc outlaw who lives here in the town of Balmora. The bounty on her head is 250 gold if she's brought to justice. Here are my collected thoughts on the questline so far. There's a lot of crossover with the Thieves Guild, which is fairly interesting, but that's the least of my concerns. Eydis has us outright working with the criminal organization of the Kimona Tong, shaking down seemingly innocent businesses. She's also sending me out to kill Thieves Guild members and telling me not to report their deaths to the officials, lording her authority over mine. It's actually all very interesting, and I'm really curious if this is something that plays out further with the quest line, or if it gets overlooked and forgotten about. Through asking around town and learning of Dura's home on the east side, I looked around for nameplates until I landed on hers. Entering inside, spear in hand, I ascended up her house until I ran into the orc. Speaking with her, her dialogue was fairly mundane, and there weren't really any quest-related topics. Deciding to just go for it, I got 2 heavy attacks in with my spear, and Grabol was dead. An easy enough task, I returned to FireEye, and she asked me how I was coming along with the bounty. Telling her it was done, she rewarded me with 250 septums. In order to ascend to the rank of Protector, I need 1 favorite skill to be at level 40, and now 2 of them needed to be at level 10. So this means I now had to pay for even more training. Of course, going out into the world and leveling on my own time is a valid option, but having a lot of gold in this game can work wonders too. For the minor favorite skills, I really wasn't too interested in any of them, except for maybe say heavy armor. Choosing to level it along with Armorer, I rested and ascended to level 20. Feeling good and ready, I went back to FireEye and she told me that I needed to carry out more duties before I could actually be promoted. Asking for more orders then, she said that she didn't have any more contracts for fighters below the Protector rank. She ended with saying I should pay a visit to the other guild halls in order to see what's out there. Deciding to try out the big city next, I traveled to Vivec and went up to the Foreign Quarter Plaza. Entering inside of the guild hall there, I embarrassingly kept wandering in circles, wondering where the other fighters were. Eventually, I found a way I hadn't gone through and ended up meeting with Lorbumol Groaklak. He asked if I wanted orders or an advancement. Asking for the former, he told me that someone named Nar Groshagramf was supposed to hand a ring over to someone named Renz Yeneth, but hasn't done so yet. I'm to retrieve the Juiced-Off Feather Ring for Yeneth and hand it to Lorbumol. Lorbumol tells me that Nar could be found in the Hlalu Plaza if I wanted to go to him straight away. I thought I had recognized Rain's name, and as it turns out, he's also another member of the Kimona Tong, based out of the Dren Plantation, which is very peculiar. I levitated over to the neighboring canton and entered inside. Looking around for a bit, I spotted an orc, and it turned out to be my target. Because he had the awestruck Nervarine opening dialogue prompt, I was able to boost his disposition past 60, and then, when asked about the ring, he openly handed it over to me, saying that he never liked it anyways. Recalling back to Lorbumol, he asked if I had gotten the Juiced-Off Feather. I told him yes and handed it over for a payout of 100 septums. Now I was finally able to ask for a promotion, and he granted me the rank of Protector. Inquiring about further orders, Aglak informed me that there's an Argonian named Tongue Toad who's running his mouth off. He's based out of the Rat in the Pot in Aldrun, and Aglak says he'll give me 500 gold to silence him. This definitely feels more like a personal bounty than protecting and serving the public. It seems like a far cry off for the Fighters Guild. Regardless, I have my orders and take the Mages Guild teleportation services to the Aldrun Guild Hall and wander inside of the establishment. Tongue Toad was walking around in the lower area, and speaking with him, he introduced himself. Bringing up him as a topic, he was shocked that the Fighters Guild would want to have him killed. I was prompted to either talk with him or to start jabbing away with my spear. Choosing to talk at first, Tongue Toad asked to be let go and said that I could report him having left town. This then gave me the prompts of killing him or letting him escape. I thought about it for a bit, but ultimately decided that I wanted some action. I chose to attack and he began to panic. Oddly enough though, this didn't provoke him to run or to start the fight. He just continued to stand around. Thinking I was in the clear, I gave him a good jab with my spear, and this attracted the attention of everybody inside of the tavern. They all came to his aid, and it was here I thought it would be best to start this interaction over. Reverting to my last save and choosing to kill him again, this time I cast Frenzy. This caused him to attack first, and made it so we were able to fight one-on-one. He didn't really put up much of a challenge, and in 4 or so hits, the Argonian was defeated. Again, something was fishy about this whole scenario. He was killed for apparently bad-mouthing someone or something, and even he wasn't really sure what he did wrong. In any case, I recalled back to Vivec and informed Aglak of the Argonian's death. He called it good work and paid me out my 500 gold. For the next contract, Lorbumol tells me that there's a bounty out on a Khajiit named Drosakar. All he says after is that this Drosakar possibly lives somewhere in the St. Oms district. Following the lead, I leapt over to the Canton's Plaza and began asking around. Some of the citizens were saying that there's a suspicious looking Khajiit in one of the homes off of the south side canal. Dropping down to the lower level, I started to go in and out of the establishments until I landed on Drosakar's. Again, speaking with him, there wasn't really any quest-related dialogue. When asked about his profession and the Thieves Guild though, he told me that he was indeed a member of the faction, and everything fell into place from there. Deciding not to further prolong the inevitable, I got 2 good jabs into the Khajiit before he fell to the ground dead. After scoping the spot for potential loot, I recalled back to the guild hall, and Aglak asked me if the Khajiit has been slain. I told him the contract was completed, and he paid me out 500 septums for the bounty. I wanted to ascend to the rank of Defender, and the requirements for that was 1 favorite skill at 50 and 2 at level 15. In the entrance area of the hall, there was a red guard named Rag who offered long blade training. At this point, services were getting expensive, as every new session was now priced in the high 300s for gold. Unfortunately, there wasn't a trainer in the hall for heavy armor or armorer, and not wanting to go on a wild goose chase, I chose to just continue with the questline. Asking Aglak for more orders, he tells me that someone named Lyriel Stoin in Aldrun owes someone named Sovereign Doves over 2,000 septums of debt money. If I successfully retrieve the gold, I get to keep half. Stoin can apparently be found back at the Rat in the Pot. Teleporting over to their Mages Guild Hall and venturing into the Aldrun Tavern, I found Lyriel stationed behind the bar. Speaking with her, I asked about the debt money. She told me that her brother, Ruran, originally was the one who owed the Kimono Tong. He's since gone missing in action though, and the debt has fallen onto her. The issue is that she's unable to pay that sum of money. When asked further about Ruran, she told me that in order to pay off the gang, he went to search for riches in the caves of Malapi, near Narmok. Nobody has seen him since though. There's seemingly no way to extort Stoin for the gold, and it looks like Malapi is my best shot of getting the money. Although, Lyriel has no further information to offer on the caves. Making my way to the fishing village, I asked around amongst the NPCs for directions, and the best they could give me was that Malapi was northeast of here. Navigating through the West Gash region, and a little bit beyond the Telvain ancestral tomb, I found the entrance to the cave and went on inside. Shortly along the path, I encountered my first challenging enemy, Adramora Lord. It fought using destruction magic, and luckily, I was able to strike it down before its fire blasts got the better of me. Just beyond it was a cross section, and the path to the right led to Ruran's body. He had a bunch of loot on him, including 501 gold coins, which unfortunately was nowhere close enough to covering the debt. However, as pointed out by the UASP, all that Aglak needs from me is to deliver the 2,000 septums, so selling all of the valuable and enchanted loot in here should suffice for the payment. In terms of enemies, there were a few more Daedra to defeat, as well as 2 sorceresses. Once everything was killed and their belongings taken, I originally returned back to Lyriel because I thought she would have had more dialogue to offer. There wasn't anything more to discuss with her though, so I ended up returning to Lorbumol and handed over the 2,000 gold. The nice part is that 1,000 of it gets returned, so with enough goods looted in exchange for money, you most certainly can come out of this one net positive. So far, a lot of these Fighter Guild contracts are comprised of killing members of the Thieves Guild and aiding the Kimono Tong criminal organization. It feels as though the guild is a little lost in its vision right now, and that helping out the common folk of the province has been put to the side. Speaking again with Lorbumol and Vivek, I asked him if there was any more work to be done. He responded by saying that there's a bounty out on the head for someone named Adriara Vandacia. Inquiring about who the woman is, Lorbumol tells me that she can be found within the Census and Excise office of Seydanin. He warns me that there might be a patrol of guards around, so I should take caution. If I successfully complete this contract, I'll receive up to 500 gold. Arriving in the town of Seydanin, I first tried the main building entrance for the Census and Excise office, the one where Celis Gravius gives you the coded package, as well as where you pick your character's class and birth sign. However, I didn't see Adriara anywhere, so exiting back outside, I decided to try with the warehouse right across from it. It was secured by a level 45 lock, but casting an unlocking charm did the trick. Unsure of where I was supposed to go, I ascended up some stairs, turned a corner, and at the end of a hallway, I saw a woman standing on her own. Approaching, it was Adriara Vandacia, and speaking with her, I tried to go through her dialogue prompts in order to get some sort of reaction out of her. However, there wasn't anything pertaining to the Fighters Guild, the Thieves Guild, the Kimono Tong, or anything sort of related to the subject matter. After trying the latest rumors, advice, and secrets, I decided to exit the conversation and just cast Frenzy. Ensuring that the guard walking around wouldn't enter the fight, I cast the spell and it was just a one-on-one. I poked her a few times with my spear, and she attempted to cast some spells on me, but it didn't really work out in her favor. After a short battle, Adriara fell dead, and I looted what I could out of the rest of the office. As I've previously said, it's interesting that you can find NPCs around the wilds and civilized parts of Morrowind, and at the time of meeting them, you have no clue what purpose they serve in the game. However, as time goes on and more quest lines are explored, their true reasoning for being placed where they are, and their actions, dialogue, etc., it all kind of comes to fruition. In my case, Adjira Vindacia was one of the first NPCs I really had to do a head scratch at. I remember exploring around the Census and Excise office way early on in my playthrough, and I remember seeing her tucked away in the upstairs portion. I spoke with her for a bit, but I wasn't really sure what purpose she served. Now, it's clear that she was the subject of one of the Fighters Guild quests, and after all this time, it's really neat to see things unfold like that. Returning back to Lorbumol, he asked me if I had taken care of the Imperial. He called it good work and paid me out 500 septums, then saying he had more orders for me. Inquiring about the work, he tells me that one of the Imperial magistrates has been causing trouble for the Fighters Guild. He tells me that the magistrate is Rufinus Elias. Lorbumol directs me over to Ebonheart and says that there's a 1,000 septum bounty on Rufinus's head. I'm to go to the Grand Council chambers and slay him. This is definitely a very strange contract, and if anything, it is by far the strangest. This is the second order in a row that I've been given that pertains to killing somebody affiliated with the Empire. And the only background information I got on Rufinus was that he was just giving the Fighters Guild some trouble. Something is definitely awry here. Regardless, arriving in Ebonheart, I tried to speak with some of the NPCs around just to see if I could get more information on Elias. Unfortunately, nothing really came of it, so I made my way over to the Grand Council chamber. Entering inside and poking my head around a bit, I finally landed on the room that contained the man himself. Speaking with Rufinus, I was really hoping that he'd give me something to work with, and to be honest, there were a lot of different dialogue prompts pertaining to a lot of different topics. He's probably a very knowledgeable man. He probably could have helped me with a lot of different tasks, and provided me with a lot of different information. However, the unfortunate part is none of it was really relevant to the story at hand. So, using Morrowind's laws against its people, I cast Frenzy and he struck me first. In doing so, that caused us to fight a 1v1, and with a few prods from my spear, Rufinus Elias, the magistrate of the Empire, lay dead. Casting Recall, I returned to Lorbumol in Vivec, and he asked me if I had gotten rid of the Imperial yet. Telling him yes, he called it good work, said that he hoped the guards didn't bother me too much, and then paid me out my sum of 1,000 septums. When asked for more work, Groaglak told me he had nothing left. He said to go speak with either the Guildmaster, Seoring Hardheart, or with any of the other guild stewards in the other cities. With that officially marks the end of Lorbumol Groaglak's quests for the Fighters Guild. Now that I've officially reached the rank of Protector, I can return back to Eydis, Fireeye, and Balmora. Before doing so, I worked on leveling up my minor favorite skills. I brought them both up to appropriate levels, and then when speaking again with Fireeye, she promoted me to the rank of Defender. Asking her for more work, she tells me that someone named Alof the Easterner has seen some orc outlaws nearby his farm. Apparently, Duke Dren himself has contracted the Fighters Guild to investigate the orcs at the Daedric Ruin. Eydis then gives me directions over to the farmhouse. She says that Alof can give me more information regarding the orcs and where they can be found. As per her instructions, I traveled northeast of Pelagiad and north of the Arvel Plantation. I pretty much landed on the fields of Camus, and there was Alof's farmhouse. Speaking with the Nord, I asked him about the orcs at the Daedric Ruin. He tells me that they're currently residing in Ashunartis, a ruin northeast of the farm and west of the old Dunmer stronghold. He heard rumors that the orcs are led by a barbarian named Barub Grubamag. He bets that if she's killed, the rest of the orcs will leave the farmers alone. Lining up my bearings, I levitated high up, spotted some Daedric ruins to the northeast, and landed in them. There are a variety of Daedra posted outside, so I defeated them all, and then entered into the shrine area. Immediately, I was challenged by an orc wielding a two-handed claymore. He had a decent amount of health, but he didn't hit extremely hard. Heading a little further in, I spotted a shrine to Malakath. There were two more orcs stationed on either side of the shrine. Aggroing the one to the right, he was classed as an agent, so he didn't perform very well in combat. He had even less health than the warrior before him, and he hit for even less points. The last orc that I encountered was actually a healer. They tried to cast a variety of spells, but most of them ended up missing, so with a little bit of time, most of their health was whittled down. At this point though, I was a little bit confused. I'd yet to fight Lorbumol, and it seemed like the shrine just about ended here. Taking a peek at the local map though, it seemed like there was another entrance into the shrine elsewhere. I looked around for a good bit before realizing that it was in an elevated area. Casting Levitate, I floated my way up until I heard the sound of a female orc aggroing onto me. It was Bamog and she came rushing up to the edge. Utilizing my Levitate, I had her drop down to the shrine area, and there I picked her apart with my spear. With all of the orcs defeated and the shrine scavenged, I cast Recall and made my way back over to Balmora. Speaking with FireEye, she asked if I had dealt with the orcs. I told her yes, and she responded by saying that Alof could confirm my story. Therefore, she paid me out my 500 septums for the Duke's contract. Asking for more work, FireEye tells me that a distinguished client has placed a contract on the Verethi gang. This client wants the leader, Dovris Verethi, killed, and apparently the gang can be found in Manamu, a cave just southeast of Pelagiad. Once the leader is dead, I'll be paid out 1,000 septums. This definitely seems like an easy enough task, and it feels like it's right up the guild's alley. Before embarking on the newest contract, I decided that I wanted to put my newest skill to use, Long Blade. I was originally looking for a Daedric Daikatana, or a two-handed claymore of some sorts, when all of a sudden I came across a weapon I had completely forgotten about. A while ago I had stashed away Hope's Fire, the one-handed long blade wielded by Almalexia herself. The attack power on it was decent, and the enchantment itself was pretty powerful. With my long blade skill all the way up to 50, I thought it was a pretty good idea to start using it. And after the first connected hit with Hope's Fire, I figured that this was probably going to be my main weapon from now on. Traveling southeast of Pelagiad, I arrived at the doors of Manamu and entered inside. Immediately, I was faced with the gang member and other Red Guard, and took her out pretty easily. My lack of long blade mastery does show with this fight, as it does take a few swings to hit her, but there isn't too much trouble here either. In total, there were 6 lackeys that needed to be killed in order to make it all the way to Dovris. Once all of them were defeated, Verethi himself was found in a larger chamber, nestled under a canopy atop a platform. The UESP places him at level 13, so he really shouldn't be much of an issue for mid to high level players. Once the gang is defeated, the cave can be looted, and among the treasures are gold, skill books, potions, and leveled items. Once all was said and done, I returned back to FireEye and she asked me what my progress was with the Verethi gang. I filled her in on the details and she paid me out my 1,000 septums, calling it good work. I asked Eydis for more orders, and she told me that there's a dangerous creature on the loose in the Serrano tomb. Inquiring further about it, she tells me that a hunger has actually desecrated the tomb. She wants me to go over to it, which is southeast of Fort Moonmoth, in between Lake Amaya and the Ashlands, and she wants me to kill the hunger. It seems easy enough, and again, a proper Fighter's Guild job. It took me a little bit to properly follow the directions and find the tomb. It turns out that it's not far from Alof the Easterner's farmhouse, just off of the fields of Camus. Once ready, I began my purge. Immediately down the first pathway, I came across a Bone Lord. Defeating it, I began to check and clear each room, finding and fighting off more undead. As it turns out though, the hunger that I was sent here to kill can be found pretty much right off the bat. It's just beyond a level 10 locked door, and by the state of the area you can definitely tell that it got its hands dirty. It wasn't hostile, so I got to make the first move. According to the UESP, this hunger is actually significantly weaker than most hunger you'd find in the wild. What's more is that in its inventory is the Serrano Ebony Helm. If you're proficient in heavy armor, it's likely to have some pretty good use to you. Otherwise, it could be sold for a value of 15,000 septums. Before leaving, I looted the rest of the area and wanted to find whatever treasures were left behind. There was some minor loot worth a pretty penny, but I'd argue that the Ebony Helm was probably the big score from the dungeon. Once wrapped up, I recalled back to FireEye, and she asked me for any updates on killing the hunger. She remarks that the Serrano family is likely grateful for the work, and she pays me out my 1,000 septums. When asked for more orders, she said that that's it for her, and that I should try out the other guild stewards within Morrowind. I decided to pay a visit to Aldrune in order to speak with Percius Mercius, the former guildmaster turned guild steward. Percius is actually quite the unique NPC. Caius himself even knows and trusts him. What's more, speaking with Percius, he actually acts as a voice of reason. He'll give you advice on certain contracts, and he'll even tell you his opinion on the validity of each one. For example, on all of my past contracts, he has something to say about them. For Adriara Vendacia, he comments that there was no reason to kill her. In terms of the codebook, he says he's glad that I didn't have to resort to violence. For Lyriel Stoin's debt money, he comments the obvious in that Rannis was the one with the debt. However, he calls it as it is and says that Rannis was actually murdered. He thinks it's best that if I pay the 2,000 septums off myself, although that's already said and done. For Durgarbol, he doesn't offer much more information other than she's already dead. As for Tongue Toad, he said it's best that I just do what I feel is right. Finally, when asked about the Fighters Guild, he comments that things have gone sour since he stepped down from Guildmaster. He does pay respects to Soaring Hardheart's fighting abilities, but he also comments that he's heard rumors of him making deals with some shady characters. Percius refuses to discuss more of the matter, but at this point, I feel as though it's pretty obvious he's referring to the Kimona Tong. This would make sense as to why guild members are being sent to secure debt money for the criminal syndicate. It also makes sense as to why we're specifically targeting the Thieves Guild for a lot of our contracts, because the Thieves Guild is at odds with the Kimona Tong. It also makes sense as to why I was sent to kill Adraria and Rufinus of the Empire. They were likely causing a lot of trouble for the criminal syndicate's operations, and with them out of the way, the Kimona Tong could work much more efficiently. In any case, it's time to get to work with Percius. Asking for orders, he tells me that sometimes the Fighters Guild contracts get a little strange. Apparently, there's a young buoyant armiger named Uline Hennem, and she hired the Fighters Guild as backup to clear out some necromancers. The armigers are supposed to act as the civilized world's defense against those within the Ghost Gate. So although Percius implies it's strange that she needs some help in order to take out necromancers, he does mention that she's young, inexperienced, and ambitious. Percius says that Hennem will meet me outside the ruins of Voss. Voss is apparently located in the Sheogorad region. He marks it on my map and tells me that my best bet is to take a boat to Dagon Fell. Before leaving the guild hall, I paid a quick visit to Traylin, one of the resident NPCs. He offered me some more long blade training, and he was able to get me all the way up to level 59. Following Percius's instructions, I took a boat to Dagon Fell, and from there located Voss way to the far west on my map. Levitating and leaping my way there, I eventually landed at the ruin and spotted the buoyant armiger. Speaking with Uline, she asked if I was here on behalf of the Fighters Guild, and wondered if I was ready to wander inside and fight the necromancers. I told her yes, and she said that she'd fight by my side. Together, we stormed into Voss and began our assault, fighting mostly undead creatures like skeletons and bone lords. I made sure to stay at the front of the pack so that way I could take most of the aggro, as well as I could deal most of the damage with Hope's Fire. As for Hennem herself, she's not too shabby of a fighter, and she's able to summon her ancestral ghost to aid us. After a little bit of fighting, the two of us ended up in a big chamber. This chamber contained 3 different NPCs. 2 of them looked like mages of some sort, while the other just looked like a commoner. The mages were friendly enough, but the commoner seemed hostile towards me. I wasn't sure if I should be killing the sorceresses or not, but I sort of clued in after speaking with them that they probably weren't my target. I did end up killing Debentian Silbaniti, the bard Breton chasing me down, but he too had nothing to do with the quest. Backtracking a little bit, I came across a door leading into the Voss Tower, a whole new zone. Going through it, I encountered more undead, and this time a couple of Dremora. It was a regular Dremora and a Dremora Lord. The Lord gave me a little bit of issues, but a few shots with Hope's Fire and both of them were defeated. Ascending up some more levels, Hennem and I fought our way through a few more enemies before landing on our person of interest. Darius Adram, the necromancer in question, was present at the top of the tower. After he spotted us, we rushed in and began our assault. It didn't take long for him to die though, and after his defeat, Uline stopped me mid-fight and thanked me for my services. She appreciated the help and said that the battle would have been hard without me here. She told me that she'd stay behind for a bit, but I could go on ahead and return back to the Fighters Guild. Recalling and making my way back to Aldrune, I spoke with Percius and he asked for updates on the situation at Voss. He had said that Uline Hennem had actually given me a very positive report. This whole interaction has actually helped our representation with the buoyant armigers, and because of my outstanding performance, Percius decided to share the reward money with me and paid me out 500 septums. According to the UESP, if Hennem's disposition is below 70, she'll give you a less than glowing rating, and that would have resulted in Percius handing handing me less money for the reward. Asking the guild steward for more orders, he starts off by saying that often the Fighters Guild has to uphold justice when nobody else can. He received a contract straight from Cyrodiil, and it's regarding finding the murderer and outlaw Nerer Benaran. Benaran was apparently a member of House Redoran, and now he's the leader of an outlaw band in Sargon. Sargon is apparently north of Margon. Percius wants me to find Nerer, and as he politely puts it, bring him to justice. Making it all the way to Margon, I began asking its citizens for information regarding Sargon. A lot of them asked why I'd want to go there and said that it's purely my business. Charming them and trying again, they reiterated that they're not sure why I'd actually want to head inside of the cave. However, they did tell me that Bugdarash Grageshul or Nulena Tatus would be the best people to ask for information regarding it. Heading inside of the outpost, I located Nuleno and asked her about Sargon. She commented that it's north of here. However, I'll have to find a way across the sea. It's on an island, and that island comes with a long swim and a long walk. She calls it even further due west of Voss, and thinks the best way to get there is from Dagon Fell. Taking a peek at the map, I noticed that it almost looked closer traveling to the Urshilaku camp than it did to the Sheogorad region. So I made it all the way to the Ashlander tribe, rested in one of their beds, continued northwards towards the island, and began looking around for my place of interest. This little place of Morrowind was jam-packed with ruins, caves, and tombs. So believe it or not, I actually had a little bit of difficulty locating Sargon. Eventually though, I found the cave and began my Fighters Guild duties. Similar to the Varethi gang in Manamusa, Benaran had a small band of outlaws with him. And as you could probably guess with quest progression, they were slightly more challenging than those of the gang. Including Nerer himself, Sargon contained a total of 8 different enemy NPCs. They were all dark elves and their classes ranged from witch hunter to warrior to knight, barbarian, etc. They had varying skill levels too, with the lowest being 15 and the highest being 19, as Nerer himself. Successfully defeating Benaran, on his body he has an enchanted blade, as well as an ebony cuirass, which again could go well with the Serrano ebony helm, or could be sold for a whopping value of 35,000 gold. Once all was said and done in the cave, including looting its treasures, I returned back to Perseus and he asked if I had taken care of Nerer. I told him yes, and he called it good work. He's happy that Benaran had been brought to justice, and he gave me my share of the bounty, which was 500 gold. Asking Perseus for an advancement, he promoted me to the rank of warder. I then asked him for further orders. He responded by saying that Sergio Avon Oren of Saran has given the Fighters Guild a contract. Apparently, he's been having problems with some bandits in the city. Perseus wants me to go over to Saran and speak with Oren, as he'll be able to inform me of what's going on. Inquiring about Avon, Perseus calls him a good leader. He says that most leaders tend to neglect their people and their duties. However, Oren takes his role very seriously. He cares very much for Saran's people and the well-being of the town. Hopping on a silt strider and traveling over there, I began to ask around for where I could find Oren. One of the guards told me that he lived in the manor to the west of the temple. Entering inside of the household, I ascended to the upper level and located the leader. Oren greets me and asked if I had come on behalf of the Fighters Guild. I tell him that I'm here to take out the bandits in Saran, and he tells me that they could be found in Sataran, a cave to the northeast of town. If I managed to kill their leader, Dalder Ceres, the bandit raids on Saran would end. Once my task has been completed, he tells me to report back to him, as he'll be the one to give me my reward. Lining up my bearings, I cast Levitate and start to float northeast of the city. After scoping out the surrounding area for a bit, I landed at a cave that turned out to be my place of interest. Entering inside, it was go time as I was immediately charged at. You can definitely tell the difference between that of Perseus's quests and those of Lorbumol's and Fire Eyes. Perseus is all about protecting and serving the people of Morrowind, exactly what the guild stood for when he was guildmaster. However, since times have changed and the guild has fallen on dark times, the new quests surround aiding the biggest spender and have rather questionable morals surrounding them. Interestingly, within Sataran, there was actually a cage containing quite a few slaves. Killing Yulgir, the overseer, I was able to take his keys and free every single one of them. The hostile NPCs within Sataran are actually easier than those found in Sargon. However, they do have greater numbers, so there's a bit of a trade-off. Once everybody was defeated, including Dalder, I returned back to Avon and told him about the demise of the bandits. He said that I had served justice to Ceres, along with his companions, and that House Hulalu thanks me. As a reward, he pays me out 1,000 septums. Casting Recall, I returned back to Perseus and asked him for more orders. For this next one, he calls it a small task. Apparently, the Empire charges the Fighters Guild with keeping the forts and mines supplied, so he asks if I'd be willing to take a load of flint to the Elith Pal mine. Asking further about the mine, he hands me the shipment and tells me to deliver it to someone named Dangor. Dangor is a Bosmer and he works within the mines. The mines are apparently at the base of Red Mountain, and he points them out as being west of the Zeneb camp. Traveling over to the Ashlander tribe and making my way towards the center of the island, I began my search for the mines. Fortunately, it really didn't take too long to find them, and I entered inside. To be honest, I half expected there to be some sort of trap or twist involved with this one. Delivering 20 bottles of Flynn just felt too easy for the Fighters Guild. However, upon going inside, I noticed that it was filled with Imperial Legionnaires and a bunch of miners. Officially letting my guard down, I wandered all the way to the end of the working tunnel and found Dangor. Speaking with him, he asked if I was here to deliver the Flynn. I told him yes and handed over the bottles. Dangor simply responded by saying thank you and that he was looking forward to this shipment. Beyond that, there really isn't much more to this one. There are veins of raw ebony that you can try and steal, however, if you're caught, it probably won't work out in your favor. To be honest, at first I was taken aback by the ease of this mission, but then after letting it digest and process, I actually have a pretty big appreciation for this one. I feel like it goes very hand in hand with serving the citizens of Morrowind. It also does a pretty good job of carrying out the lore for the Fighters Guild being a government-sanctioned faction. I find it works well with throwing a curveball at the player, making you believe that something's gonna happen when in reality, it's a fairly simple fetch quest. And because of that, I actually respect it a lot. Returning back to Percius, he asked if I had delivered the Flynn to Elith Pal mine. Telling him yes, he called it good work and said that a load of Flynn can get pretty heavy after a few steps. He himself prefers brandy. Following this, he offers me some for my efforts. I tell him yes, and as a reward, he hands me a Cyrodiilic brandy as well as 500 gold. When ready, he tells me to check back for more orders. The Fighters Guild questline is certainly ramping up. Percius believes the guild should be led in one way, whilst Lorbumol, Gro Aglak, Eydis Fireeye, and Searing Hardheart believe it should be led another. I've yet to go to the Wolverine Hall and meet the guild steward there, and something tells me that there are some really big and important contracts coming up that are going to determine the guild's future. Speaking with Mercius again, he asked if I was looking for more orders, or perhaps even an advancement. Inquiring about the former, he told me to come back when I achieved the rank of Guardian. For now though, he thinks it's best that I get sent over to Hrundi in Sadrith Mora for some work that's more appropriate for me. Percius calls him a good man and says that I can trust him, which, by today's standards within the guild, certainly means a lot. Curiously, I tried to ask for a promotion, but Mercius told me that I needed to double my training, as more than likely my minor favorite skills weren't up to snuff. Leaving the hall, I took the Mages Guild teleportation services from Aldrun to the Wolverine Hall. From there, I descended a bit down the staircase before I landed outside the doors to the faction. Entering inside, I got a quick survey of the NPCs before I went ahead and spoke with Hrundi. The Nord wondered if I was here for orders or an advancement. Choosing the former, he informed me that someone by the name of Lariana Macrina needs the guild to provide her with some assistance. She's going to be making an expedition inside of the Dwemer ruins of Kurdoms. Asking about the ruins, Hrundi tells me that it's far to the south of Sadrith Mora. Apparently, Lariana will be waiting outside for me, and he tells me that together we're to clear out some necromancers who have set up camp inside. Before leaving, he marks it on my map, and I notice that it's rather close to Holamayan. Fortunately, due to my progress for the main questline, I have a pretty quick way to travel over to that region. Making the necessary arrangements for traveling to Ebonheart, I spoke with Blata Haturia, who offered me passage over to the Dissident Priest hideout. From there, I leapt and levitated over to the marked section and arrived outside of Kurdoms. Standing by a campfire was Lariana Macrina. Speaking with her, she asked if I was here on behalf of the Fighters Guild, saying that my movements were pretty obvious. She was hoping that there would be more of us, but I'll have to do for now. She tells me that she's seeking out a great beast within the ruins, and that her and I will explore together. Getting a little more into the story, Macrina says that this specific Daedroth is one in which she's been tracking and hunting for quite some time. They've had squabbles in the past, and the last time she's battled the beast, named Harelvesu, she landed a critical strike on it. The beast is weak and is still healing from their last encounter. She calls out the ruins as being heavily guarded and that there's some fighting to be done before we reach the Daedroth. Telling her I'm ready, the two of us begin our assault inside. So, as the quest was explained to me through Hrundi, He mentioned that we'd be dealing with necromancers. As it turns out, there are no necromancers in here whatsoever. The two of us mostly dealt with dwarven centurions, so spiders, spheres, steams, etc. They were powerful foes in their own right, but certainly not necromancers. The ruins of Kurdoms was actually a relatively small space. There were a mix of a few hallways and smaller sized rooms, but there was nothing more beyond the one and only zone. Macrina does talk to the player at certain points, as when you get to a specific section, she'll warn you that the beast is near and that the two of you should be on your guard. Within one of the rooms, I managed to find an enchanted spear called Ilkarok. It was a dwarven construct and had the enchantments of Fortify Spear for 10 points and Night Eye for 15 points. Definitely an interesting weapon, but I'm not so into using spears anymore. Heading further into the ruins, it was finally time to face Hrelvesu. I got to a steel and iron door that was secured by a level 60 lock and opened it using a key I had found previously. Charging in, we began our attack on the Daedroth. During it, Macrina cries out that she has come for the beast and that it should ready itself. It had the standard stats of most Daedroth, including its attacks, health, and abilities. Once it was defeated, Lariana tells me that even though the beast has been slain, she still feels uneasy about the rest of the ruins, as after all, this was apparently its lair. She decides to stay and look around further, but thanks me for my help and bids me farewell. It is interesting, as there are no more areas to explore or wander around in, but perhaps she could be curious about that giant crystal within the room. Regardless, I returned back to Hrundi in Sadrith Mora and told him of our accomplishments. Lariana had a glowing report for me, so the Nord gives me 500 septums for my work on the contract. Asking for more work, Hrundi says that someone by the name of Novor Drethin has hired the guild to take care of a problem over at Desapla Mine. Inquiring about the mines, he tells me that the client is actually its owner. The job has something to do with Nyx hounds getting loose and attacking some of the miners. As for its location, he says the mines are northeast of the Dunmer stronghold of Falan Serrano, west of Tel Arin. He marks the stronghold on my map, and it's time to set off. Exiting the Wolverine Hall through these southern doors, I lined up Falan Serrano on my map and began to leap there. Arriving at the structure, I turned to the northeast and located a small cave door. Entering inside, I had my weapon ready, but let my guard down as soon as I laid eyes on a couple of miners, along with some Imperial Legionnaires. Locating Novor, I spoke with him and he greeted me, asking if I was here to help out with some problems in the mine. He tells me that a pack of Nyx hounds has been attacking the miners. At first, the crew was thought to be dead. However, they recently returned safely. This wasn't before the healer, Taras Arathen, went looking for them, and now the crew is worried that Taras has been killed. Novor asks me to go looking for him, as he must stay here and protect the workers. Agreeing to do so, I was confused as to why the able-bodied, battle-hardened Imperial Legionnaires couldn't do it, but I guess it's more money in the guild's pockets. Looking around the mines for a bit, I came across some unexplored territory that contained Nyx hounds. No matter what level you are, Nyx hounds really aren't that big of a threat. In total, there are around 4 or so of the beasts, and Taras himself could be found up on a ledge on the left-hand side of the mines. Speaking with him, he asks if Drethin sent me. If so, he'd like for the two of us to travel back to Novor together. I tell him to follow me, and the rest is relatively straightforward and easy. As soon as Taras was within close proximity to Novor, I got a journal update. All Taras could say to me afterwards was thank you, but Novor offered me a little bit more. He asked if the healer was back yet, and telling him yes, he thanked me for my efforts and offered me 4 pieces of raw glass as a reward. If not used for alchemy, these can be sold for around 200 septums apiece. Returning back to Hrundi, he asked me what my progress was with Desapla Mine. I filled him in on the details, and as my official compensation, he paid me out 250 gold. Asking for more work, Hrundi actually offers me 2 contracts at the same time. The first deals with taking care of a corpus stalker that found its way into Berwyn's trade shop up over in Tel Mora. The second one deals with bringing the outlaw, Rels Tenem, to justice. For the former, Hrundi doesn't offer much more information, other than I should get the rest of the scoop from Berwyn herself. As for the latter, he tells me that Rels is a wanted murderer. He was last seen near Voss, which is why Hrundi thinks it's best to kill 2 birds with 1 stone, as both contracts are in and around the same area. Starting off with the corpus stalker, I made my way into the town of Sadrith Mora and took a boat ride over to Tel Mora. Locating the trade shop on my map, I entered inside and spoke with the proprietor, Berwyn. She started off by asking if I was here to take care of the stalker. Telling her yes, she said that they managed to trap it in the upstairs section. However, no one has dared to get near it, for fear of contracting the disease, which completely makes sense. Usually, Master Arian of Tel Voss should be the one to take care of such matters, but as of late, he's been held up with his duties. She tells me to please hurry as it's wrecking her shop. Going on my way, I ascended to the upper level and spotted the diseased being trapped beyond some crates. Stalkers aren't too tricky as enemies to begin with, and if you have some sort of ranged attack or long weapon, killing it should be a cakewalk, as the journal puts it. I helped myself to some of these smaller treasures found within the area, and then descended back down to Berwyn. Speaking with her, I told her that the corpus stalker was taken care of, and she thanked me for my efforts. No extra reward though. Next, it was time to go to Voss in order to deal with the outlaw, Rels Tenem. Leaping over to the area, I entered inside of Varro's trade house and spoke with Heron Mananalit. She told me that Rels was a thief and that he had recently stolen from some of the farmers in the area. She thinks it's best to speak with them to get a better scoop on where he could be. Heading more towards the Voss outpost, I located a Dunmer man named Drainos Elvel and asked him about the outlaw. Elvel tells me that Rels stole some guar and some of the crops. He isn't sure where he is now, but there's a very good chance that the Ahomusa Ashlander camp would. Wandering north to the Free People's area, I chatted with Camus and asked her about Rels. She tells me that a man went to the cavern of Shalit. Shalit is on a small island southwest of Alt Daedroth. This man apparently fled on a night when neither of the moons were shining, and she speculates that this could be Rels. She gives me some pretty solid instructions on how to get to the island that Shalit is on. I'm to cross the water to the north, and from the island I'll land on, I travel northwest. From there, I'll happen across 2 more islands. The second island's north side contains the entrance to Shalit. It admittedly did take me a while to find it, as it was pretty well hidden in the coves of the sea. I kept running around Drethin Ancestral Tomb, but eventually landed on the cave. Entering inside, I wandered through the caverns for a bit before coming across a note. It reads, "Gaiden, here's a blade for the new man. Send him ahead and we'll set up his arrangements. Dinner is waiting, but not for you. Muvrule is sick again, so you've drawn sentry duty. Don't worry, you'll be getting a portion of his share. Stay alert, bounty hunters are seeking us. But I feel fairly secure up here. Signed, Rels." Located throughout the long corridors and passageways of the caverns are various trinkets, weapons, riches, and loot. At the end of it, there's a doorway leading into the Drethin Ancestral Tomb. As pointed out by the UESP, if you didn't read that note by the entrance, you likely would have wandered into it and would have had to face a whole plethora of other problems. However, the giveaway from the note was Rels telling Gaiden that he feels safe up here. Around the center point of Shalit, I looked up and noticed a small carved out area up in the rocks. Levitating over, I followed the passageways which shortly thereafter led me over to the real enemies. In total, there were 5 bandits including Rels Tenem. They ranged in levels from 12 to 18, and their classes varied from warrior to witch hunter, barbarian, knight, crusader, etc. Some of them had some pretty decent loot too, including enchanted weapons and armor. There were 3 separate sections which contained 3 groups of bandits. The final one was where Tenem resided. Killing him, he too had some decent loot, and his hideout held some interesting treasures. Among the most interesting to me was a page ripped out of Rels Tenem's journal. It reads, "We've struck a bargain with evil. While I am uncomfortable and feel some unease with our current arrangement, I believe these warrens will serve us well for some time. Those who hope to destroy me must be of stout spirit and cunning mind, for if they simply forge ahead in these caves, they may meet a fate far worse than death. When we first discovered these caves and began our explorations, we were sure we found refuge from our enemies. Little did we know, as we pushed into the interior galleries, what we would find. In the final chamber, we came upon the ruined portal to a vast tomb. At first, we were eager to chance upon some riches to fill our coffers, but instead, we found ourselves within the nest of deadly creatures. By our wits and skill of arms, we were able to retreat from the dark lair. For a time, we sealed the entry, but the threat continued to gnaw at us. It was Gaiden who conceived the plan with which we presented to those beings of darkness. In return for our right to dwell within these caves, we provide sustenance for these creatures. To assist us in this venture, we we've created a lure, a path for the bounty hunters and meddlesome folk to follow. The unwary will find themselves in the clutches of a black fate. Molverley is very unhappy with the current conditions, and I'm finding myself concurring. This cannot come to a good end, but we must stay the course until a new safehold can be found. If you were just as curious as I was as to what was on the other side of that door, I went on through to the tomb and encountered someone dead. There weren't anything too tricky, however, it was a little further into the tomb that the real evil resided. Cracking open a door, I was lunged at by the vampire, Marara. Marara can most certainly prove to be a difficult fight for mid to lower level players, and that's not including her undead backup that she has with her. Interestingly, Marara actually has her own quest that's a part of the vampire questline, so it probably would be best to wait to kill her. However, in my case, I'm going to be doing the questline with a whole other character, so I slew her and took her enchanted ring, which has the effects of Reflect for 20 points on self, Fortify Acrobatics for 10 points, and Resist Normal Weapons for 40 points. The Drethen Tomb is rather small and doesn't offer much more in terms of exploration. But regardless, I recalled back to Hrundi and turned in both of the contracts. He rewarded me 500 septums for killing the Corpus Stalker, and he rewarded me 250 for defeating Rel's Tenem. Getting right into the next contract, I asked the Nord for more orders, and he gave me a job that was all too familiar. He said that he needed someone to bring a shipment of Sujamma to the Dunerai Caverns. Asking about the cave, he said that the workers in the mine have been complaining about the lack of provisions, mainly Sujamma. He echoes Percius's words and tells me that the Fighters Guild is responsible for supplying the Imperial mines here on Vardenfell. I'm to hand the Sujamma over to someone named Nellakar. Apparently, the Dunerai Caverns are southeast of the Ghost Gate, and in between the Foyadas of Asanadan and Asherdan. Before, when Percius had me doing a mission similar to this one, I had mixed feelings about it, calling it rather easy compared to the work I had already done, but also appreciating the break from all the action and the suspense that it made me feel, not knowing if there was going to be a twist or not. As pointed out by a commenter, higher level characters wouldn't really think twice about this one. It's as simple as carrying 20 bottles of alcohol to a mine and handing it to a contact in there. However, looking at things from the perspective of a new, lower level player completely changes everything. You're given 20 bottles that weigh 3 pounds each, so that's 60 pounds of inventory space taken up right there. Then, you're sent off to a pretty far area that has no real way of connecting to any of the fast travel points. Plus, all you're given is rough directions and landmarks. Without leap, levitate, and powerful gear, I can certainly see how this quest would prove to be challenging, even for a higher level character like mine. What's more, I actually got myself lost in and around this area. It isn't really a region that I've had the pleasure of exploring much of. The rocky terrain and high ridges make it difficult to spot entrances to caves and tombs, and the dust storms certainly didn't do much to help with my vision either. Eventually though, I did find the Dunerai Caverns and entered inside. These mines were meant for the harvesting and procurement of glass, as opposed to the Eleth Pals, which were meant for ebony. Again, there were legionnaires posted all around, and workers mining away. Towards the end of the passage, I came across the High Elf, Nellakar. Speaking with him, I told him that I had his shipment of Sujamma. Handing it over, he was content that the miners would be happy again, and shared that he personally isn't able to stomach the stuff. He apparently prefers Valenwood wine, which is such an Altmer thing to say. Similar to the Flynn quest, there isn't much more to do around here unless you want to take your chances with stealing from the glass veins. Something I did find to be really interesting though, is that there was a High Elf Nightblade within the caverns named Volinaro. In Oblivion, there's a High Elf Nightblade also named Volinaro, who's a part of the Mages Guild. Morrowind's High Elf doesn't really look like the one from Oblivion, although I don't know that that should be taken too highly into account. But other than a dialogue prompt pertaining to the Mages Guild, it doesn't necessarily classify if he's a part of the faction or not. But I definitely do wonder if this could be the very same troublemaker found in Bruma. Recalling back to Hrundi, he asked for my progress, and I told him that the shipment had been delivered. He called it good work and paid me out 500 septums, which is funny because that's double what I earned for killing a group of bandits. I guess though, the government pays pretty well. Speaking with Hrundi and asking for more orders, he mentioned that there's a contract to assist another Imperial researcher named Sundale of Shimmerine. Sundale is waiting for me out at Telicero, which is somewhere in between Saran and Molag Mar. She'll need an escort through the dungeon, as she doesn't have the same combat skills like Lariana Macrina from prior. Getting straight to it, I teleported over to Balmora, and from there, took the Silt Strider to Saran. Peering at the map, Telicero was a short distance away from the town. Leaping my way there, I arrived at the Dunmer stronghold and began looking around. Sundale was nowhere to be found though, and I wasn't quite sure if I was supposed to head inside of the ruins or not. Wondering what to do, I spotted a note attached to the smaller structure present on the platform. Approaching it, it read, "Looks safe, went down to scout it out, signed Sundale." Already, I knew this was likely going to be a bad start for her. Venturing into the stronghold, I was attacked by 6th house servants and creatures of the like. It was interesting because I hadn't really faced the 6th house since the main questline. It was neat to see how far my character had come since then, and to relearn the intricacies of Dunmer strongholds. I fought against Dreamers, Ash Zombies, Ash Slaves, and Ash Ghouls. The only ones out of the bunch to really give me issues were the Ghouls, as they were good at letting off some pretty powerful spells. The first zone I was in was called the Upper Level, and there were quite a few hallways, passages, rooms, and even a cave system to explore. I actually really enjoyed this quest. I felt as though there was a lot of tension and build-up as to the whereabouts and well-being of Sundale. Part of me wondered if this was going to be a setup, and the other part of me wondered if she was already dead. There wasn't a whole lot to loot in the first area, but the second area was a little bit different. Making my way through several of the passages, I came across a door leading to the lower levels of Telicero. This zone consisted of one long room that connected to 5 other smaller rooms. In here present with me were more Dreamers and Ash Ghouls. In the central area, there were 2 open containers, and one of them contained some decent loot, including the Telicero Propylon Index. Clearing out the enemies and checking room to room, through the first door on the left-hand side, I spotted a scared high elf cowering on a table. Beneath her were a couple of rats, which were being a nuisance towards her. Clearing out the critters, I got in close and began speaking with Sundale. She asked if I was her guide from the Fighters Guild and apologized for going on ahead without me. She wondered if we could travel back outside together, and I agreed. Because all of the enemies from the previous areas were defeated, there were no problems leaving the stronghold. As soon as we made our escape, she thanked me for my efforts and made it seem like she was going to find her own way back to civilization. Recalling back to the Wolverine Hall, I spoke with Hrundi and he asked for updates on the Altmer. I filled him in with the details, and he rewarded me with 500 septums. Asking the Nord from my next contract, he told me that there's a 2,000 septum bounty out on the head of someone named Engair. Inquiring about it, he tells me that Engair is a wood elf mercenary in the employ of Master Naloth. Engair can be found somewhere in Tel Naga, the tower that's within Sadrith Mora. Hrundi stresses though that I must be discreet in bringing the Bosmer to justice, as he doesn't want the guild's relationship with House Telvanni to suffer. He ends with saying that I'll receive half of the bounty if I'm able to take care of it. Leaving the Wolverine Hall, I levitated into town and entered inside of the tower. I tried to speak with a bunch of the NPCs in and around the area for information regarding Engair, but none of them had him as a dialogue option. So, scouting all around the tower and looking far and wide, I just couldn't seem to locate the wood elf. He wasn't in the lower tower, the upper tower, the general quarters, or in any of the outside areas. My next plan of action was to begin looking through the locked doors within the tower. Going through a few of them, most acted as shortcuts to the other areas I had already been through. There were, however, a few doors that served their own purposes. Unlocking several in the very upper part of Tel Naga, I came across rooms with trinkets, potions, enchanted weapons, gold, etc. Definitely a lot of useful items to loot, use, and consume. One of the rooms though contained a lone guard, and looking at his nameplate, it turned out to be Engair. Closing the door behind me, I tried to speak with him to get some sort of dialogue or reaction regarding this quest. Unfortunately, it didn't really lead anywhere or spark anything interesting. He told me that he was an assassin, so I pieced together that he probably made some enemies along the way with his kills, likely resulting in this bounty on his head. To get the job done, I cast a frenzy spell on him so as to not attract the attention of anyone else nearby, and then I struck him down with Hope's Fire. He fought with a bow and some enchanted arrows, but he was slow to the draw, and that resulted in him losing the battle. He had a couple of enchanted items on him, and leaving the space, I checked to make sure that nobody had any hard feelings about his death. All seemed well in Tel Naga, so I recalled back to the guild hall and turned in the quest to Hrundi. He called it good work and paid me out my 1,000 septums. Getting right into the next one, I asked Hrundi for more orders, and he certainly gave me quite the unique contract. He told me that the Fighters Guild had been hired to find a place called the Pudai Egg Mines. Inquiring for further information, he says that no one really knows where these mines are located. Common rumors and thoughts are that it's somewhere in and around the Sheogorath region. According to legend, there are 7 eggs of gold located in the mines. Hrundi wants me to find this mythical cave and bring back the 7 eggs. He tells me though that there isn't much stress in finding the Pudai Egg Mines, as it likely isn't a real place, but it's the only contract he has left. Exiting the conversation, my next destination is that of Dagon Fell. Teleporting around and hopping on a couple of boats, I arrived at the fishing village and began asking around for any information. Speaking with some of the NPCs, they didn't really tell me anything that useful. There are lots of rumors surrounding the local area, and when asked about advice, they mentioned that even though Mazuleft is the big Dwemer ruin that everybody comes here for, there are more hidden and less obvious sites that have even more riches. I doubted this was meant to be a hint towards the egg mines, but I did take it as a general statement that grouped them in there with the other ruins, caves, and dungeons. Regardless, I continued onwards and began my search for the impossible. This quest is certainly interesting, and I don't think any of the others have been structured quite like this one. The player is told the general area of where to explore, the island of Sheogorath, which isn't that massive, but still decent in size to look around in. There are no further directions, instructions, advice, or anything of the sorts given to you. You're left to your own initiative, sense of wonder, and direction, and that's certainly something I can respect out of this quest. Well, as it turns out, the Pudai Egg Mines is a real place, and isn't super tricky to get to or find either. In fact, they're pretty much off of the main pathway up in the Sheogorath region, heading west from Dagon Fell. Entering inside, there are mostly Kwama workers, which are harmless, and Kwama foragers, which are fairly easy opponents. Wandering around the mines, I found a door leading into the Queen's lair and entered on through. Shortly after, I located the Queen, and just behind her were the 7 golden eggs of legend. I did have some bloodlust in me, so I slew the Queen and her worker, which wasn't necessary as neither of them were hostile. The real issue though lies in bringing the eggs back to Hrundi. Each egg had a weight of 30. That means that just to have them in my inventory, I needed 210 pounds worth of freed up space. Even after popping some strength and feather potions, I was still over encumbered. But the nice part was that I was able to cast recall and land right in front of the Nord, saving me from abandoning half of my gear. Speaking with him, he asked if I had located the mines yet, still doubting their existence. I told him yes, and handed over the eggs of gold. Hrundi was surprised to say the least, and congratulated me on my achievements. He said that House Tilvani had put a lot of money into this contract, and he paid me out 10,000 gold. Asking for more work, Hrundi says that that's it for him, and that the only orders left are to speak with Percius Mercius in Aldrune. It isn't stated by Hrundi, but Lorbumol Gro Aglak had also told me to speak with Sioring Hardheart, the guild master of the Fighters Guild. With almost all of the quest lines wrapped up, the only ones remaining are those given out by the old noble guild master, and those belonging to the corrupt newer one. Something tells me that I'm in for a treat for the final act, and I'm really excited to see what's ahead. These next few quests are very important, and they result in different outcomes for the Fighters Guild's legacy. For the first timeline to end this playthrough, I'll speak with Sioring Hardheart first, and then I'll revert back and speak with Percius Mercius to end it off. Before going ahead, I located a Master Longblade trainer, Olms Drathen, within the Armiger's stronghold of Molag Mar. Using a combination of his services and those of Wayne's back in Balmora, I brought my favorite skills all the way up to the necessary requirements for Guardian rank and beyond. I then went on to grab my Daedra Claymore, which I've been dying to use in battle. Feeling ready for whatever tasks lay ahead, I took the Silt Strider over to Vivek and levitated all the way up to the Foreign Plaza. Once inside, I went into the guild hall and descended down to the lower levels. Beyond Aglak, there was a spare room which acted as Hardheart's office. Approaching the guildmaster and speaking with him, he hit me with the infamous line of whether I was here for orders, an advancement, or something else. Choosing orders, Sioring tells me that he's been watching my progress through the faction. He says that someday I'm going to make a fine guildmaster. However, with all of the unrest over in Cyrodiil, Hardheart claims that the guild needs allies. These friends are needed to preserve the guild's existence and legacy. Sjoring finishes his opening dialogue by saying that he needs me to kill the bosses of the Thieves Guild. With a lot to unpack here, I first asked him about the unrest in Cyrodiil City. Sjoring believes that Uriel Septim was never a strong and capable leader, and he calls him dying of age and illness a coward's death. If only Sjoring could see how Uriel really bites the dust. Apparently, Chancellor Akato is the one pulling the strings of the Empire, and allegedly, all of Uriel's heirs are shape-shifting Daedra planted there by Jagar Tharn. As Hardheart puts it, the Empire is in chaos. Some suspect the Legionnaires are going to be pulled out of the province and sent to personally protect the Emperor from usurpers. This will leave greed and envy in the eyes of multiple generals, and they're going to set their gazes on the throne. The only Imperial factions that are going to survive are those with the strongest allies. As for those allies that Sjoring speaks of, he openly admits to making deals and alliances with the Kimona Tong. He likes the way they think and the way they're able to operate with such efficiency. He recognizes that the Thieves Guild already has very poor footing within the province, but they're a direct competitor with the Kimona Tong and therefore need to be eliminated. He reiterates that the Thieves Guild bosses need to be taken out if real change is going to be brought to Vardenfell. Inquiring about the leaders, Hardheart specifically calls out 3 of them. Helend can be found at Dirty Muriel's Corner Club within Sadrith Mora. He says that I can kill any other operatives found within. The next one is Habasi the Khajiit, and she can be found within the South Wall Corner Club of Balmora. The final one is Angoth, and he can be found within the Rat in the Pot over in Aldrune. Once all of the bosses are dead, I'm to report back to him. In order to make my time a little bit easier, Hardheart gives me 5,000 gold to deal with any fines incurred during these assassinations. As a side note, I love these sort of unhinged and far-fetched beliefs that some of the NPCs spew in these games. I enjoy thinking about these theories from their perspective and like to work out who or what could have influenced them with these ideas. Is there any sliver of truth present within these pieces of dialogue, or should they all be taken with a grain of salt? It's conversations and bits like these that make me have a deeper appreciation for this game. Setting off and getting right to it, the first boss I targeted was Habasi over in Balmora. She's actually an NPC I've had a run-in with before, as she gave me vital information that was used against the Kimona Tong. Funny how the tables have now turned. Locating the Khajiit on the main level of Southwall, I spoke with her to see if she had any last words for me. Unfortunately, she didn't, so I cast Frenzy and let her make the first move. Sugarlips is level 19 and fights with a glass dagger. Lucky for me, my long blade skill was boosted pretty high, and the Daedra Claymore is able to deal some serious damage. With Sugarlips Habasi defeated, I was curious to see if anyone else in the tavern was going to try and fight me next. Due to Frenzy though, nobody budged and respected the rules of the land. Moving on to the next boss, I took the Siltstrider over to Aldrune and looked around for Angoth in the Rat in the Pot. Locating the Bosmer, I also wanted to try and get some dialogue out of him, but nothing really important came from it. So, I ran the same procedure over on him and struck him down with the Daedra Claymore. He's a level 19 scout and fought with a steel dagger. Upon his death, no one came over to me either and abided by the first strike law. The last of the bosses was Big Helend, and she was located somewhere over in Sadrith Mora. Heading over to the coastal town, it admittedly took me a little bit to find Dirty Muriel's Corner Club. Once inside, I asked some of her lackeys about her whereabouts, and even whilst charmed, they never gave up any information, which I can certainly respect. Ascending upstairs, I laid eyes on the High Elf and quickly scanned her dialogue options. Not really seeing what I wanted out of it either, I cast the almighty Frenzy spell and challenged her to one-on-one combat. Helend was level 17 and fought with a silver spark blade. 2 strikes with the Claymore, and that marked the end for all 3 of the Thieves Guild bosses. It was a pretty simple enough task, and honestly, one of the easier ones in terms of combat. However, that's more than likely because it was used to progress the storyline in a definitive direction. Plus, the use of Frenzy made it so none of their allies or the town guard could interfere with the kills. Returning back to Sjoring, he asked if the job has been taken care of yet. I told him yes, and Hardheart was so pleased, he named me his second in command. He finishes up with saying that our allies want the Master Thief, the top dog of the Thieves Guild himself, taken care of. When asked about any further advancements, Sjoring said that there isn't anywhere else to go beyond Champion, except for his position, Guildmaster. He does jot it down as something that the both of us could talk about later though. As for what he said prior, he acknowledges that the small guild bosses have all been slain, but the head honcho still lives on. Apparently, the master thief of the Thieves Guild, Gentleman Jim Stacy, and his second in command are hiding out in Simon Ferlini's bookstore. My main target is Jim, but his comrade would be a decent score for the Kimono Tong as well. Quite interestingly, Hardheart gives me his word that as soon as the Thieves Guild has been crippled, he'll make me the new guildmaster and then retire. Feeling pretty good about his offer, I left the faction hall and descended down to the lower wasteworks of the Foreign Quarter. Making my way into the canal works, I eventually located the bookstore and entered inside. The shop was quaint and small. At first, as far as I could tell, Simon and I were the only people in here. Attempting to speak with him, I wanted to see if he had anything to say about Gentleman Jim Stacy or the Thieves Guild in general, but there wasn't anything pertaining to those topics. As it turns out though, right behind Simon, on the other side of his screens, there was a door secured by a level 65 lock. Regenerating my magicka and remaining out of sight, I cast an opening spell and went on through to a new area. This room was just as small as the last, and seemingly acted as a secret hideout of sorts. Within it, there were two NPCs, and their nameplates put them as Crazy Legs Arantamo and Gentleman Jim Stacy. These were my two remaining targets, and I was really excited to hear their last words, but unfortunately, I could only entertain surface level dialogue with them. Getting straight into the violence, I cast Frenzy on Stacy, and he came charging in at me. He's a level 22 thief and wields a Daedric short sword. Unfortunately for Jim, he doesn't have the build or gear to be an amazing fighter, and with my character wielding powerful weapons and donning high-level armor, the fight isn't too tricky to come out on top of. With Jim slain, I began to loot his inventory when I noticed something really interesting. Stacy was actually holding the skeleton key, the legendary lockpick that can open any door and never break. Although, this skeleton key has a limited number of uses, compared to its Oblivion counterpart, which has an infinite amount. This forces the player to be a lot more selective in the containers and doors that they wish to open with it, whilst keeping the security skill still relevant. For fun and to please Hardheart, I targeted Crazy Legs next and cast Frenzy on him. Arantamo is a level 16 savant and fights with a silver dagger. He's an even weaker opponent than Gentleman Jim Stacy and can be struck down relatively easily. In his inventory, he possesses several books and scrolls of knowledge, including guides to cities, information about the other provinces, and the Lives of the Saints book. Looting the rest of the hideout, there are certainly some other items of interest. Most notably though are septums scattered throughout the chests and containers. With the deed done and the Thieves Guild crippled, I excitedly returned back to the Fighters Guild Hall, anxiously awaiting my promotion to Guildmaster. Speaking with Sjoring, he asked about the Master Thief and if he was taken care of yet. I proudly told him yes, and Hardheart enacted the key twist within this faction. He called it good work and thanked me for taking care of the Thieves Guild. He followed it up though by saying that now the only threat to his position was me. I showed promise but a little too much ambition, and Sjoring ends it off with saying that I won't be missed. He takes out his weapon and begins swinging away at me. Just like that, the real boss fight begins. Hardheart is a level 23 drill master, and he wields a warhammer of smiting. According to Percius, the Nord is one of the best fighters the guild has seen in a really long time. Wielding my two-handed Daedric claymore, I struck Sjoring down in the halls of Vivek's Fighters Guild, and with his death, his worst fears came true. I rose to the rank of Guildmaster and completely pushed him to the side, smudging his legacy with this faction. There are a few enchanted pieces that can be found within Hardheart's old quarters. As mentioned before, with the Nord's passing, the player automatically assumes the role of Guildmaster. Most NPCs can accept this, but a few of them can't. Speaking with Lorbumol Gro Aglak, he notices that I've risen to the rank of Master, but he claims that he's the one who will take over as leader of the faction. He says that he won't let me take his rank. Lorbumol turns hostile and charges in at me. Aglak is a level 19 smith and wields a drow club. I would say that he's an easier opponent to handle than Hardheart, if his level wasn't already a major influence over that, and I was able to strike him down with a few hits. He actually had quite a lot of interesting goods in his inventory, including the juiced off feather ring. Beyond that, everyone else spoken to seemingly accepts me as the new guildmaster, including Eydis Fireeye, Percius Mercius, and Hrundi over in Balmora, Aldrun, and Sadrith Mora. Speaking with Mercius, Most of his dialogue surrounding the Fighters Guild and my new position results in him saying that only time will tell if I'll be a good master, and that he hopes I'll use my power and influence to steer the guild in the right direction. As mentioned prior, this is one of 2 endings for the Fighters Guild, and now I'll revert back in order to speak with Percius instead of Sioring. Traveling over to the Aldrune Hall, I got my promotion to the rank of Guardian and asked for more orders. The Imperial told me that the only way to save the Fighters Guild from the corruption of the Kimona Tong is to eliminate Sioring Hardheart and those who are loyal to him. Mercius tasks me with taking out Eydis Fire-Eye and Lorbumol Groaglak first. If accomplished, he said that he'll stick his own neck out for me and support me as the new guildmaster. Interestingly, when asking him about the other 2 guild stewards, he gives me their exact locations, practically as if I hadn't already received whole quest lines from them. This confused me at first, but as it turns out, players don't need to do every single quest in the faction to get to an ending. All that matters is progression through the guild ranks, as the title of Guardian is needed to continue with either Hardheart's or Mercius's final quests. Traveling to Balmora, Eydis was my first target. Entering inside of the guild hall and approaching the stairs, Fire-Eye shouted down at me from the top. She's noticed my progression through the guild, and apparently word on the street is that I've become Mercius's lapdog. She knows that I'm here to kill her, and she calls me a disappointment. The conversation ends, and then the fight begins. Eydis is a level 19 Master at Arms. She dons an almost complete set of bone mold armor and fights with a tower shield and dwarven mace. Even with Hope's Fire, her health takes some hits to go down completely, showing that she was probably one of the more prepared fighters that I've had to face. Once she was defeated, I went into her inventory and noticed she still had Satild's codebook on her, and a little bit of gold. With 1 down, I went through the familiar steps of traveling over to the Vivek Hall and descending to the lower level. Getting within eyeshot of Lorbumol, he too shouts at me from a distance, and also has noticed my progression through the guild. The word's out that I've come to kill him, and he reiterates that he's the only one who will be taking over as Guildmaster. The fight goes pretty much the same as it did before. A few strikes with Hope's Fire, and the orc was defeated. He has the same items in his inventory from before, which again, can be nice for the taking. Returning back to Mercius and reporting the deaths of the other stewards, he tells me it's time to take the fight onwards to Sioring Hardheart. He says that Sioring is the final step to freeing the Fighters Guild from its current corruption. In preparation for the big battle, Percius hands me a key. He tells me that this key unlocks the door to his private room. Within, I'll find 2 suits of armor. They were apparently his from many years ago, and he thinks that they'll help me in my fight against Hardheart. He still calls him one of the best warriors here on Vardenfell and tells me to prepare myself. Curiously, I asked about the suits of armor, and Mercius offered a little more insight into them. There's a set of orcish armor and a set of glass armor. The orc set was gifted to him after he helped out to uncover the truth surrounding an Imperial soldier being unjustly accused of murder. The glass set was gifted to him from Athen Serethi of House Redoran. Mercius enlisted the Fighters Guild to help clean up and take care of the last outbreak of blighted creatures over in the town of Margon. Interesting little lore pieces aside, I went into his room and looked through his chests. My character is more proficient in light armor, so the glass set is more up my alley. The helmet is the last missing piece of glass armor that I need, so it's definitely something that I'd want to take. Once finished up in Aldrune, I recalled back to Vivek and approached Sioring. Interestingly, Hardheart wasn't on edge or hostile like the other 2 corrupted leaders were. In fact, he didn't even suspect a thing, and instead offered me his quest of killing the Thieves Guild bosses. Deciding to just go ahead and cement my legacy, I cast Frenzy on the Nord and struck him down again. The fight went pretty much the same as last time, with Hardheart falling in a few strikes. With the corruption ended and the guild ready to turn a new leaf, I traveled back to Mercius and told him of the good news. He said that I had saved the faction from Sioring and the Kimona Tong, and this time, as promised, the better man actually named me the new guildmaster and congratulated me in the end. He shares with me most of the same dialogue prompts from before, except this time, Percius has something interesting to say for the Sioring Hardheart topic. Mercius claimed that although the Nord was slain, the guild shouldn't rest so easily. He fears for troubling times ahead, and not just for the Fighters Guild, but for all of Tamriel. The Imperial tells me to be ready for anything, and that my position as Guildmaster should be to try and protect the Fighters Guild. This is best done not by allying ourselves with criminal organizations like the Kimona Tong, but rather with hard work and high standards. Closing out, thus officially ends the Fighters Guild questline featured in the Elder Scrolls 3 Morrowind. So here are my thoughts, comments, and remarks regarding the questline. I genuinely don't have anything negative to say about it. I thought it was well structured, paced nicely, and left the player humming and hawing at the right places. The Kemonotong infiltration was perfectly played out, and for the unsuspecting player, like myself, you really questioned the guild's morals. I found the Thieves Guild crossover most interesting, and as mentioned prior, there are a couple of ways to participate in and finish both quest lines at the same time. It turns out too that a handful of the quests for their story involve multiple members of the Fighters Guild, so that'll be a fun tale to explore with another character. Knowing that the Thieves Guild and the Kemonotong are at odds with one another, the quests targeting certain members of that faction were the biggest giveaways at this faction's corruption. I especially enjoyed the branching pathways for the Fighters Guild and how you can side with Sjoring or Percius. To be honest though, other than keeping the Thieves Guild members alive, it really didn't feel like there were too many differences for the outcomes in the end. Sjoring and Lorbumol are still dead, and technically, the Kemonotong's influence within the faction has come to an end. Like I said, yes, the Thieves Guild and their storyline has technically been saved, but if you plan on doing their questline with another character, like I do, it doesn't really feel like there's many differences between the two endings. Lastly, I found that the difficulty level for the Fighters Guild wasn't super crazy or anything of the sorts. Obviously, that's expected for the beginning and middle quests, as players are lower levels for them, but even the final quests of killing the bosses for either faction were a little too easy. I'll chalk it up to my character wielding what's probably one of the most overpowered longblades in the game and being a higher level, but nevertheless, I did find it pretty interesting. I suppose it makes sense for the Thieves Guild, as they aren't meant to be expert warriors, but the Fighters Guild bosses could have used a little more oomph to them. Some final things to cover before this video ends. According to several sources, if you want to play through this questline and want to stay neutral, so being able to also participate in the Thieves Guild questline, the best quests to take are the first few belonging to Eydis Fire-Eye, all of Hrundi's, and all of Perseus's, completely ignoring those belonging to Lorbumol and Sjoring. If you want to walk the more corrupt path, the best contracts to accept are all of Fire-Eye's, Lorbumol's, and Sjoring's, ignoring Hrundi's and Perseus's. That officially closes out the Fighters Guild questline. Thank you all for watching, and until next time, keep on adventuring.